field day for the heat down there. 1,000 people in the street singing the song and the carrying sign, mostly saying hooray for our side. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody wrong. Young people sweeping their mind, getting so much resistance from behind. We got to stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look, it's going down.
Welcome to the Robust Opposition. I'm here with my friend John Mirisch, who is a member of the Beverly Hills City Council, and I've known John since 2012. John has been a reformist city council member. He's been the mayor, what, 3 times now since you were first elected?
Yes.
And you've always taken on the special interests. And even though you're a Republican, you and I worked together to get Beverly Hills to be the first and so far only city to ban fracking.
Yep.
And that was not symbolic, because Beverly Hills actually had a functioning oil well on the Beverly Hills High School property.
Right.
So you were raised in Sweden, or you were educated in Sweden, where they believe in the precautionary principle that says, let's not do something unless we understand the effects. In the United States, they do the opposite. So why don't you tell some of the things that you've accomplished on the city council that you're most proud of, before we talk about how Beverly Hills is dealing with the coronavirus?
I can just say that I've always looked at local government as, if done correctly, the best form of government, because it is closest to the people, it's closest to home. And you keep mentioning I'm a Republican. That's really irrelevant. It's nonpartisan, and it should be. Another reason why local government, when done correctly, is good, because it's issue-based. It really should have nothing to do with what party one belongs to. And so, you know, a number of things that, you know, I feel that I contributed to in Beverly Hills is, for example, historic preservation. You know, having lived in Sweden many years, there's a value of the history. There really isn't as much, even though we have less of it in the United States. And there was kind of a joke that historic preservation Beverly Hills style was taking a picture of a building before you tore it down. And we actually now have a historic registry, which has 40 some properties, including City Hall. That's one thing. You know, another thing is I started something called the Sunshine Task Force, which, you know, aims to create more transparency in local government and more public participation. And I can tell you, it's something that as other people have their turn to become mayor, we have a rotational system. You know, other council members aren't necessarily as interested in transparency and like making decisions behind closed doors if possible. So I just try and really look at each individual situation, call balls and strikes, try and create good policy that is pro-people, pro-resident. And I do and have, you know, the opinion that we should be putting the residents first, putting people first, people above profits. And business is important, but people are more important. And so that's kind of been my guiding principle. It's also my guiding principle when it comes to how we should deal with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Now, you have taken on real estate developers, and real estate developers are sacrosanct in Los Angeles. I mean, we know that there's a scandal right now with the Los Angeles City Council and developer money, and they're very hard to buck because they contribute a lot to candidates.
Well, isn't that the problem in our system in general? It's all about the money. I mean, you know, everything, when I, you know, now having done this for 10 years, it all comes back to 2 terrible Supreme Court decisions that are at the root of almost everything. And one is Buckley versus Vallejo, because money is not speech, and 2, Citizens United, because corporations aren't people. So if you accept the fact that money isn't speech and corporations aren't people, we see, I think, the root of a lot of bad policies that have led to short-sighted kinds of decisions that are being made at the councils. And it's, you know, again, my goal has always been to try and do what's best for the community. I think as you once described me, and I completely agree, I describe myself as a communitarian. I think communities are extremely important, especially when we're living in a county with as many people as in the entire country of Sweden. LA is actually the most dense urban area in the US. San Francisco's 2, San Jose 3, New York only 4. And so when you have that many people living together, it really is important that we know that we have a place where we belong, where we're at home, and where we're connected. And that's community. And so I believe in the power and the value and the strength of communities, which unfortunately these days is opposed greatly by the fiscal interests, whether it's Wall Street or developers or big tech, who want to have more Sacramento running our lives and less local decisions.
Yeah, well, why don't you tell, before we talk about the coronavirus, why don't you tell people some misconceptions they might have about Beverly Hills, that everybody's rich and they live in a mansion?
That's true. I mean, that's one thing that we're constantly facing as a stereotype, because people, I guess, know Jed Clampett and Eddie Murphy and Beverly Hills Chihuahua and all of it. Well, actually, Beverly Hills isn't even in the top 10 in the county of the highest, median household income. The median household income in Beverly Hills, it's robust, it's good, it's over 100,000, but it's not, not everyone is a zillionaire. In fact, over 50% of our residents are renters, and that's something that people don't know. We have a lot of seniors. I think it's about 7.5% of our residents are below the poverty line, and mainly a lot of those are seniors on fixed incomes. So while there are the great estates and people who are super wealthy, there are also a lot of normal people who are just sort of struggling to make ends meet, but who love living here because even though we're 35,000 people, they feel it's a connected community. Now, I like to say that on our best day, we're Mayberry RFD. We're kind of that small town village feel where people feel connected. And on our worst days, to quote a friend of mine who lives in town, we're like Peyton Place in an Ibsen play with a little Shakespeare thrown in. And, like any other community, though, I think most communities would consider themselves in some way to be Mayberry RFD. And that to me is, as said, that's the strength of America, is the notion that we're in it together, we're connected. The individual does matter and means something, but it's not just rugged individualism or every person for themselves, but we live in a community where the community itself is what matters. And that to me, as said, that's very much informed that sense of communitarianism by the Swedish sense of collective responsibility and social responsibility that people take for granted there, and that is quite natural.
Yeah, well, we were talking about that earlier, talking about the Swedish model, because they didn't isolate people. And, at first they had a pretty good result, but now per capita, it's a lot higher than in other countries. And one of the reasons was they even admit that they didn't really take care of their seniors in the nursing homes to the extent that they should have. But
Right.
That communitarian attitude, I mean, that's how they were able to deal with South Korea so quickly, because they don't see with the apps and the tracing and all that stuff, they don't see it as an infringement on their individual freedom the way we do in this country. They see it as protecting the collective.
Right. The government makes a recommendation and people have trust in the government. And now, look, I'm not saying that Sweden handled COVID in the best possible way, but I think there's so much that this country has to learn from Sweden. And there's no way we could have even attempted to do something without it have been a total disaster, what Sweden did. And the only reason it worked even to some extent in Sweden is because if there are recommendations to do social distancing, people actually listen. And, that there is a huge difference, and that would not have worked. And it's very interesting because you have sometimes people here who are kind of on the libertarian edge who say, look at Sweden and we should follow Sweden. And I chuckle a little bit because, some of these are the kinds of rugged individualists who make fun of the Swedish sense of collective responsibility, which here is being expressed by the sort of, which has become a cliche, but it's true, is we're all in this together. And that's truly how many, if not most, Swedes feel.
Well, also the social safety net. They do have health care for everybody. They do have paid sick leave. They do have some sense of I don't know if they have a universal basic income, but they're not forcing people to work just to pay their rent and to pay for food.
Right, there's a safety net. And the thing is that this is something that in Sweden, it's not really a matter of debate. Some of these basic safety net features that you have, it's something that all of the Swedish parties, from the left to the right, all accept and support. There's an expression in Swedish, folkhemmet, which means the people's home, and not people's in the Soviet kind of sense, but really people. You know, it's that is a sort of model that people, I think, in Sweden accept, and it has worked. And there's also the sense in Sweden that things should be proportional. You know, that things should be in balance. And in America, we're not always good at balance. We're kind of always trying to get more. More is more the American sort of way of looking at things, whereas in Sweden, it's a sense of balance.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you about how Beverly Hills has been dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, because you did some things that were stricter than Los Angeles County, even stricter than LA County.
Right.
I mean, LA City, I'm sorry. You had more cases than other places. And people were saying maybe that's because Beverly Hills people are wealthier, they can afford to get tested.
I'm not sure if it was that. From what I understand, we had a bunch of people who had just been to northern Italy where there was an outbreak. So it could have been that. We had initially a much higher level of infection than other cities. Now, if you look at the stats now, other cities, unfortunately, have more than caught up. And I think part of that is because of our policies. Part of it is just, if indeed it's because of travel, it was an evening out. We don't have a lot of, sort of nursing homes here, which in some of the cities that have been devastated, it's the same thing. It's nursing homes and those kinds of environments. They didn't release the mortality rates or morbidity rates until recently, and we're actually not at the high end there either. But we on March 16th instituted something where we were the first city, I think, in the Southland to actually shut down retail as well. And LA County followed 3 or 4 days later. But it just seemed to make sense because we care a lot about, or we should, about health and safety, and to take the precautionary thing was, I think, a very wise thing. I convened because I was mayor at the time, a group of an advisory group of medical professionals, including infectious disease specialists from UCLA, USC, and Cedars. It included Jonathan Fielding, who was the former head of the County Department of Health, who has a medical school named after him. And they met at the end of the month and we discussed things. And we actually had one more meeting with them. But since then, I think that we have sort of relinquished our leadership role when it comes to it. Now, we've had meetings in the past couple of weeks, instead of with the medical task force, advisory task force, of business groups. Now, understandably, business groups are afraid, they're scared, they're anxious, they want things to open up. And I completely understand that. But I think any way in which we proceed to open things up, one has to be done in conjunction with the county, because you have to recognize, and you will find no bigger supporter of local control than myself. I really, as a communitarian, believe that communities should be making decisions. We shouldn't have Sacramento dictating to us. But local control is a tricky thing in the middle of a pandemic when you live in the most dense urban area in the United States. So if we were to, let's say we had everything under control, we can't open up, because then that would be a magnet to attract people here. And that we know would go contrary to the goal of social distancing, which is one reason why when LA decided, for example, to shut down their parks for a holiday, we said we better shut down our parks, otherwise we'll be a magnet for people to come here. We punted a little since then. At the end of April, we allowed all medical procedures to resume. I was in favor of that, but I wanted to exempt purely cosmetic procedures, which in fact the county and the state recommend against. So I wanted to take that recommendation and make it mandatory. Now,
but Beverly Hills has more plastic surgeons than any other area, right?
Well, that's exactly why we have, I believe, a responsibility to to deal with that. And it would have been very simple. We could have simply said, we'll allow all medical procedures that have a medical benefit and not allow purely cosmetic ones, in line with the recommendations of the state and the county. But the rest of the council punted, and unfortunately, it wasn't a good look for the city. And I was, none of this occurs in secret. I was very vocal about it. I find it was ridiculous to, I think I made the statement that nobody needs cosmetic Botox in the middle of a pandemic, and I stick with that. I really don't think that's the case. And, the council did that at the time using the excuse that we're aligning our policies with the county and with the state because they have all the experts. Well, now, a couple of days ago, the council has decided they want to write Gavin Newsom a letter basically saying, allow us to open now. We had a council meeting. I think there may have been 15 or 20 or more people speaking. They were all from the business community. And again, I think it needs to be informed by the science. It really does, because if we open things up and we are not actually taking the precautions, there can be a second wave. And people need to take this seriously. Unfortunately, they're not saying a lot of people, but you've seen these signs that say sacrifice the weak. And there are unfortunately some people who have that attitude is, some people are going to die. What can you do? And the answer is, what can you do is you can take sound policy to prevent the spread of the disease. Now, one thing I've been trying to push at our city without a lot of success is to expand testing in our city and also to put into place a program of voluntary contact tracing. So once things do open, you're able to capture the people who may have been exposed and deal with that. Because obviously, as things open, there will be more exposure, and you need to be able to trace that, and you need to be able to deal with that. And,
Well, it's outrageous to me that the county is not doing that. I mean, that was described as containment. Containment is to test everybody, then do contact tracing, and then to quarantine those who had it. Well, and then they said it was too late to do that. We're going to go straight to mitigation. And so we completely bypassed what these other countries did. But like you said, why can't we start it now? I mean, just because we didn't do it in the beginning, why can't we start it now? And why isn't the county doing that contact tracing?
Well, we should, and I understand that they're looking to do so. I mean, we had suggested doing an app. I mean, there are a voluntary app. Again, I understand that people don't want their phones pinged and, Big Brother is, but, opting in. And Iceland, more than half the country opted in. They've done it in Singapore. They've done it in Israel. They've done it in other countries. And that has been one of the keys to allow them to gradually open up. Because if you are going to open up and you have the ability then to trace and track down people who have been exposed, you can better contain the spread of the disease rather than it just sort of a laissez-faire, anything goes kind of attitude. So I feel they need to go hand in hand. And so I'm not going to be signing the letter, at least the one that they proposed to Gavin Newsom, basically saying, allow us now local control. And the governor has made it clear that one size doesn't fit all. And I agree, but that's on a county level. And you've got counties in Northern California that have basically low or no incidence of the disease. And LA or LA County is unfortunately a hotbed. For California, we have the highest rates of infection and the highest rates of fatality. So I'm not saying we shouldn't open and just wait, but we've got to be smart about it. And we must be informed by the science, which is, from my perspective, why I'm frustrated that we have such a wonderful group of infectious disease experts and a COVID-19 medical task force. They're the ones that need to be meeting and say, here are the things that we can and should be doing in order to open up. And here's how we can open up and do so in a safe way.
Well, it's also the tax base. I mean, these businesses that you're talking about that are worried and that are coming to the city council meetings, they're your revenues right now. And if they, we did a thing at Jimmy Gomez's, basically, where I did some research and I found out that 100,000 small businesses have closed and 42% of them are not going to reopen. I don't know if your city has done any statistics on, the numbers in Beverly Hills, but I'm sure that those businesses really are hurting.
Well, they are. And we've done things, for example, we were early on about protecting renters and start, having an eviction moratorium. We were among the first to do that, including for commercial. This is a way above our pay grade here, but from my perspective, I see the danger of COVID leading to a concentration, a creeping monopoly of some of the businesses as if we don't protect the mom and pop and the small businesses. And so I think really, instead of bailing out corporations, the federal government should be looking to help the mom and pop business owners and mom and pop landlords and that sort of thing. Because otherwise you're going to have these big Wall Street conglomerates buying up everything. And, it's going to lead to, more of an oligopoly. And
oh yeah, for sure. And that was what our protest was about. I mean, the paycheck protection plan that Pramila Jayapal wanted was going to keep these businesses open and keep people on the payroll, which is actually better than unemployment, because if the business goes under, so unemployment ends, where are they going to work?
Well, protect all businesses, and bailouts not for corporations, but for real people. And
that's not what happened. We've had 4 bailouts, and they've all been corporate bailouts.
I understand, and that to me is a problem, and it's something that people talk about. What we can do as a local government is very, very limited. Now, that being said, we've done certain things that I think are wrong. We raised salaries in the middle of a pandemic. That to me is wrong. That's bad policy. But we can't print money. The federal government can. And, if ever there was a time to do it, and people talk about inflation, I think that's a very different situation where, if there are economic reasons, basically, if we're using money that we're printing to fill a hole that is, none of our making, that we're just sort of filling a hole that has been created because of this disease, I'm not sure that kind of inflationary pressure or even stagflation would result. But the fact is, we have seen the government multiple times bail out corporations. And I really think it's time to bail out real people, but also focus on the small businesses and the mom and pops.
Right. Now, as far as what's going to happen when we open the economy, we're talking about this individualism versus collectivism or communitarianism early. The problem that I see, and I texted you from Nate Now's because I was sitting there waiting for my takeout, and I said, John, 30% of the people are not wearing masks here. Maybe you should call some police. And, I felt bad, like I'm narking out my fellow.
No, but can I tell you, Lauren, that has been a problem. And so when the mayor proposed we write a letter to the governor that, says we've had success in dealing with it, I had to say, we unfortunately haven't. There is a file this thick about times, not only yours, where I hear from residents and I call our city manager and he talks to the police. We can't even enforce seriously the rules that we have now. And by the way, in Beverly Hills, the rules that we have, you do not need to wear a mask 100% of the time just when you're outdoors, like in LA. You need to if you're within 6 feet of a person. And so we leave that to the people. But if people are not being responsible, there's so many times we've seen people congregating, and we want our police or we want our rangers or or our ambassadors to go up to the people. In some cases they have. I've heard cases of sheriffs at the beach, we're not enforcing it. Let's face it, I've seen our police, 2 in a squad car, which they shouldn't be doing, without wearing masks. I've told
you know what? Because the police, they're all Trump supporters, and they all live in Simi Valley, and they have his attitude about it. And that's the sad thing.
But their job is to enforce our local rules. And so, this is the thing, is how are we going to open up safely if we can't even enforce the rules that we have now? So that's my concern, is I want us to be able to open. And I believe that, heck, if you can get Botox, you probably should be able to get your hair cut in some way. But the fact is, we need to do so in a way that, one of our council members said you'll never get the risk down to 0. Maybe, but we can reduce the risk down as much as we possibly can. And we're we're quite a ways away from doing that. And, that's, as said, that's why I would rely on, so we have some of the greatest medical professionals at Cedars, UCLA, and USC. Let us be informed by them as to policies we can take. They know our community. They know how things work, and let them help guide us. Now, that being said, Pasadena has its own Department of Health. And the state has made it clear, even if Pasadena gets their numbers down to a low level, they will not be allowed to open before the rest of the county. It makes sense. So it's just unrealistic to suggest that maybe we should be allowed, or any city in the county should be allowed to open before the county as a whole. It needs to be at the whole, at a county level. Janice Hahn actually did write a letter to the governor, which I could be very supportive of, saying, listen, Costco is open, Walmart is open. Our small businesses should be able to, control who's in there and do social distancing just as well, give them the opportunity. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And Janice is, of course, a county supervisor. And so this is something that should happen at the county level. They do have a point there, but it needs to be done in a sensible way, because the last thing we want is a second wave.
Well, the problem is, again, somebody was at Walmart or Costco, or maybe it was Target, and the guy was not wearing a mask, and the employee tried to tell him to put on a mask. He wouldn't do it. And the employee said, okay, he pulled his cart away from him with all his goods in there. And he said, you need to leave the store now. And the guy started cursing him out. And I have a personal friend who just wrote a story on, she was approached with people that, road rage, even though there isn't a lot of traffic on the road, people are really stressed out right now.
Yeah.
They're traumatized by this whole thing. And people are snapping. I mean, it's really.
I get it, but Costco, to me, again, I don't understand even how an ultra libertarian can think that it's okay, because it's a private store. Like when you go to Disneyland, you have to follow their rules. You can't do whatever they want. Costco is private. So if you go to Costco, and the rules are they want you to wear a mask, you wear a mask. It's the same thing with no shirt, no shoes, no dice. People don't have a problem with that. So I look at wearing a mask, even if people try and suggest that it's not effective, it's this, it's that, the other. It's a way of looking to try and take care of the welfare of other people. And if we are in it together, then we need to look out for each other. And you're right, though, people are on tenterhooks. People have they're bored. They've run out of things to watch on Netflix. They've run out of things to do. And that's not a reason in and of itself to open, but it is a reason to look at, if we can, if the curve is flattened enough, how can we do so in the most safe way possible? And, there probably are other things that we can do. And I hope that the governor and the county allow us to do them. But, really, we as a city, we need to get our act together. We really do, because, at the very beginning, I think we were good on the 16th of March. We led the way. Since then, we're now reacting just to the voices of businesses who say, we're hurting, and I get it, let us open up. And I understand that 100%, but really let them open up in a way that is not going to cause the pandemic to get worse.
Okay, one more question and then I'll let you go. And that's about the city budget. Just prior to doing my show tonight, there was a group of people that I've been working with, activists who formed a coalition called the People's City Council. And they're talking about the people's budget. And they're very upset that the city of LA is cutting all these social services, but increasing, or maybe not increasing, but not touching the police budget at all. And they feel that is unconscionable. So, what is your situation in Beverly Hills with the budget?
So our general fund budget's about, $240 a year. We're going to be 40 or 50 or $60 million, conservatively speaking, over the next couple of years in the hole. We're going to be able to solve that, I think, without cutting social services. We're going to be able to do it by reducing staff, but not firing people. Santa Monica had to let go hundreds of staffers, but to do so on a glide path. So as people retire, we maybe don't replace them or do a golden handshake and that sort of thing. By deferring certain kinds of maintenance, by deferring capital improvement projects. But as said, what I do oppose, and we saw at the state level, Gavin Newsom said that state employees were going to take a 10% pay cut, which really does show we're in it together. The council, with the exception of me, already voted in the middle of the pandemic to give the police a salary increase. I don't think that makes sense. The fire department and bargaining unit is coming up next. Not only, I believe, is the city council going to give them a major salary increase in the millions of dollars, they're going to increase staffing. Now, again, COVID has shown us that we can do things more efficiently. When 95% of our fire department's calls are EMS calls, because of the fire safety standards, there are not a lot of actual fires. And so when they send someone out and they send 4 people out on a fire engine in addition to the ambulance, that's something that isn't really necessary. If we were to, start from scratch, this is not how we would plan EMS services. And so we should be more efficient. And, the notion that you need to have constant staffing of X number of people 24/7, no matter what, that's something that really allows, them to create a lot of overtime, which we know a lot of the costs for cities are in overtime. And I just don't think it makes sense. You have other council members talking about, well, if we don't give them a salary increase, their feelings will be hurt. I mean, these are some of the most well-paid public employees in the country, probably. The average total compensation of a firefighter in Beverly Hills is well over $300,000.
What?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So I just don't think that now is the time to be giving salary increases in the middle of a pandemic. If we are all in it together, we should be in it together, and we need to be fiscally responsible. Just because you may be able to technically afford something doesn't mean it's advisable or appropriate.
Why do you think they have so much sway over the city council? What do they have over those people?
I don't know. Some of them, support candidates during the election. Understandably, public safety are very popular. People in Beverly Hills love the police and the fire department. That being said, I think there's always a level of what's reasonable and what's fair and what's equitable and what's sustainable. And I just think it's gotten too far. My main concern over the years has always been sort of the pension system. And in fact, cities are going to have to pay more money for pensions because as the CalPERS funds, Wall Street lose money, cities are going to be the ones who have to make it up. And it's a big problem.
Well, that's why you need a public bank, which I know you support.
I support a public bank. I absolutely support a public bank. I think it is, a great idea. I understand that there are people who say that, government shouldn't be in that business, but we're clearly in the business of investing when it comes to, investment funds for pensions. So why not control our own destiny in that way? I also do believe in collective bargaining. And I believe that if we were able to collectively bargain with the union for a hybrid plan, that we should be able to do so. And the state ties our hands. So, now is a time where we do need to be fiscally responsible. And as said, I mean, that's a disagreement I've had for years with the rest of the council, but I certainly think the middle of a pandemic is not the time to be giving employees who are in that kind of total compensation major raises.
Right. Well, thank you very much, John. I really appreciate all the time you took with me tonight. And I'm sure some of my viewers will be pleasantly surprised that you could have a Republican city council. And I'm going to stress that again.
You keep saying that, but I'm a Swedish Republican. I mean, I'm not a typical, I'm an anti-corporatist Republican. And I will tell you this, that I think corporate Democrats have more in common with corporate Republicans than communitarian Republicans and communitarian Democrats.
This is what we did in Occupy to show agreement. It's called Twinkle Fingers.
There we go.
So you have no disagreement with me, and I will let my viewers know that I worked very hard to get John Mirisch to endorse Bernie Sanders because he loved Bernie Sanders, but he just couldn't do it.
There were a lot of things I liked about Bernie, and if he were the candidate now, I'd certainly vote for him. And in many ways, I'm disappointed that he's not the candidate. But
yeah,
there are no perfect candidates.
That's true. All right. Yeah, you don't have anyone to vote for now, right?
Now, look, last election I voted for Vin Scully, the longtime voice of the Dodgers. He's a voice I could trust. I may end up voting for him again, but we'll see.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, John. And thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay home, and keep fighting.
Stay safe, stay strong, stay home.